Hi guys, I'm Lisa. Welcome back to the channel. Now I've got my ugly Christmas blazer on today, and that can just mean one thing. It's a discrimination Christmas story. Now, one of the worst Christmases that I ever had was spent working on my claim instead of spending time with my family. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. It sucks that our employers can manipulate timelines to cause even more stress at a time of year that's already plenty stressful on its own. But by far, the worst Christmas that I had during my fight was that first Christmas when my discrimination started. In mid-December of that year, right before I was scheduled to go on Christmas vacation, my boss came down with the flu. She took one day off and then came right back to work the next day, still sneezing and coughing and spewing viruses all over the place. But what a trooper. I had to work elbow to elbow with her every day, and I had an immune deficiency, so I wasn't thrilled. And sure enough, I ended up getting the flu. It turned out this wasn't just any old flu. It was H1N1, and it was bad. No Christmas cookies, no Christmas dinner, no festive cocktails for us. It was a hard Christmas. The silver lining was that we didn't gain weight, and we didn't spend too much money that year. Now, that first Monday after I got sick, I developed laryngitis and I couldn't speak. So I asked Doug to call my boss and let her know what was up. I thought my boss and I were on good terms at the time. A couple of days later, when I was feeling better, I texted my boss and asked her if there was anything she needed me to work on from home. And I also asked her if she needed me to get a doctor's excuse for being out with the flu. I never got an answer. Around this same time, I started to get the results of some tests that my doctors at Vanderbilt had done. Tests that resulted in me getting a diagnosis, for which I needed to request reasonable accommodation. After the holidays were over and we both got back to work, I set up a meeting with my boss right away to discuss my health and our plans going forward, which is exactly what HR told me to say. But in that meeting, I never got to discuss my health. My boss interrupted me before I got one sentence out. "We both know you're not sick." What? Now, I had brought a letter from my doctor that spelled out exactly what my limitations were because I had planned to ask for reasonable accommodation that day. My boss refused to even look at that letter. She said God had already told her everything she needed to know about my situation. Now, eventually, I did manage to get the words reasonable accommodation out, and her instant response was, "Hell no, you're AWOL all the time. You're lucky I don't fire you." She had literally given me more time off just a couple weeks earlier. Why would she do that if I was always AWOL? It made no sense, so I asked her to explain. Another example was my being out with the flu 3 days before my Christmas vacation was scheduled to start. "That's called being AWOL," she said. Doug told her where I was. I heard him leave a message. And I asked her, "Didn't you get it?"
No, you have to call. You can't just have somebody else call in sick for you. Everybody knows that. Don't be ridiculous.
Any rational person would see the difference between being AWOL and being incapacitated. But not her. 3 hours later, she was still screaming at me about it.
AWOL, 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 AWOL.
And that's how my holiday ended. That and a New Year's resolution to fight for my rights. I never got my rights back. But I kept fighting through 6 more Christmases, and NASA tried to ruin as many of those as they possibly could. It sucked, but I hung in there anyway, and eventually NASA ended up paying for it. So for those of you who are out there fighting this Christmas, just know that you're not alone. There are plenty of us here in the community who know the frustration of being jerked around by a boss at the time of year when all most of us want is a little peace and quiet, and maybe a little time to party. Just like all the Who's in Whoville, the best way to beat their Grinchery is to stand heart to heart and hand in hand with each other and with everybody who loves us. Keep your spirits up in spite of them. No matter how powerful they think they are, they don't have the power to rob us of our happiness unless we hand it over to them. Happy holidays, guys. Take care of yourselves and keep hanging in.